Hello there, and a very warm welcome to our webinar on getting started with Sage Business Cloud Payroll. My name's Duncan. I'm one of the trainers here at Sage, and I'll be taking you through this webinar, which will take approximately 1 hour. So this is a fast start webinar, meaning that we are aiming to give you all the information you'd need to get up and running with payroll during this session. It will consist of some presentations, a few video demos taking you through some setup steps, and we're finishing with a live demo of running a payroll towards the end of the session. Now, if you do have any questions, you are free to ask them by accessing the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. So simply click on that question mark icon and you'll be able to type a question in where we'll be able to provide an answer. And we have also made available a couple of handouts for you. So look for the handouts icon on the right-hand side for useful links to our support articles and also a copy of the slides that we'll be running through in today's session. So let's first take a look at what we're going to cover over the next hour. So we're going to begin with an introduction explaining how to access Sage Payroll, how to add it to a subscription if you haven't already done so, and how to navigate through the software, showing you some of the most used areas. And then we're going to go through a bit of a checklist of what you'll need to actually get started and up and running using Sage Payroll. We're then going to show you some of the setup steps. So we're going to go into more detail on setting up a new payroll if you're taking on employees for the first time. And then we're going to show you the steps involved in moving to Sage Payroll from previous payroll software or a payroll provider. We've got some additional setup to run you through. So we'll look at setting up employment allowance, payments and deductions, and automatic enrolment and pensions in the software. And we'll then be at the point where we're ready to run our first payroll. So we'll take you through processing a typical pay run and how to process your employees' pay, including what you'll need to do at the end of each month. So plenty of stuff to cover there over the next hour. Let's crack on straight away with the introduction. And we'll take a look at accessing Sage Payroll, adding it to your subscription, and just showing you around how to navigate within the software. So for this bit, I'm going to share a screen with you. I'm just going to do a live demo of logging into Sage Business Cloud Payroll. So first of all, I'm just going to go to the Sage website, sage.com. And once we land on this site, you'll find towards the top right-hand corner, you have the login option. And if I click login, I'm then going to choose Sage Business Cloud Accounting and Payroll. And it will take me to a screen where I enter my email address and password. So it'll be the same details that you use to log into Sage Accounting if you're already subscribed to that. Mine are already saved in the browser, so I'll go ahead and log in. And as you can see, it's taken me straight into Sage Payroll this time, and I've landed on the Payroll Summary tab, giving some information about my next pay runs, my RTI submissions, and auto enrollment and pensions. Now, if you do have Sage Accounting, you'll be able to switch between payroll and accounting using this switcher at the top of the screen. And actually, when you finish a pay run in Sage Payroll, it will automatically post your payroll information into accounting. So if you want any more detail on how that works and how you can configure that option, we have put a link to that in the handout. Now, if you don't already have payroll, it's really simple to add. What you'll need to do is just go to your business name at the top and select Manage Business Account. You'll then head to the Subscription and Invoices area and click Manage My Subscription. What you can then do is click Manage Services, and from here you've got the various payroll tiers. So the number represents the maximum number of employees you can have, starts at 5 and goes all the way up to a payroll of up to 50 employees. You can choose the option you need, you can subscribe to that option, and you can continue using the button at the bottom. So just heading back to payroll, I'll quickly show you around some of the most used areas. I've already mentioned the payroll summary. We'll come back to this at various points during the webinar. There is a section dedicated to pay runs. So this is where you'll be actually running your payroll. So it shows you what your next pay run dates are for any pay frequencies that you've set up. And there's also an area here where you'll be able to look at any historical payrolls that you've run and get the full details of what was processed at the time. Now, in addition to this, there's areas to manage employees and pensions. You've got some year-end options that you'll use at the end of each tax year and some handy reports, one of which I will be showing you later on in the demo. Finally, you have your payroll settings. So I'll be showing you these throughout the webinar. The payroll settings is the one that I'll show you now. And this is where you would record your employer's PAYE reference and accounts office reference, as well as your HMRC reporting frequency and payment method. So that would either be monthly, or for smaller businesses, you may report quarterly. So things like payslip settings, calendar settings, we will be coming back to later. I just thought I'd give you a quick preview of the software. This has already been set up, so we're aiming to get you to this point by following the steps that we're going to explain in this webinar, and then you'll be ready to run that first pay run using Sage. So that was just a quick tour of Sage Payroll, but what I want to run through next is the type of information that you're going to need in order to set up everything within your payroll. So we've tried to split this down into three main areas. There'll be some employer details that you need, employee information, and pension information. And depending on whether you are a brand new business taking on employees for the first time, an existing payroll starting to use Sage at the start of a tax year, or an existing payroll that is switching mid-tax year, we've given you an indication of what type of information you'll need. So for the employer, for example, you need your PAYE reference and accounts office reference. You're going to need your user ID and password that you use to sign in to PAYE online services from HMRC, the report and frequency and pay method, and if you are moving a payroll across the last completed reporting period, and some of your employment allowance values. In terms of employees, you're going to need personal details, the usual stuff, full name, address, date of birth, gender, national insurance number. And if it's brand new employees that you're taking on, you'll need either a P45 from them or a starter checklist, also known as a P46. If you're moving to Sage, you're going to need a bit of information on the payments and deductions that have been made in the current tax year. So P11 reports, if you can get them from your previous software, would be ideal for that. And for any existing employee, you should have an RTI Pay ID from your previous software, which you can reuse when you set up Sage Payroll. And I've then listed some of the pension details. So you'll need information from your pension provider, including any references, groups or payment sources, for example. The employee and employer contribution details, which tends to be percentages, calculation basis, whether that's qualifying earnings or pensionable pay, tax relief and staging date. But we will be expanding on all of this as we go through the setup process in this webinar. And don't forget, you can download these slides if you want a copy of this checklist for yourself. So we are now going to move on and take a look at actually setting up the software. And as I alluded to before, there is a couple of scenarios that might apply to you. So when you first add payroll to your subscription, instead of seeing the payroll summary, you will actually see the welcome to payroll screen instead. And currently that gives you two options. There's an option that you have data from an existing payroll, which is where you're moving from another payroll provider, and you're going to start to use Sage Payroll after the beginning of the tax year. That's where things like opening balances would be required. And the other option is to set up a new payroll from scratch, which is ideal if you're taking on your first employees as a brand new company, or it's a simpler route if you're starting to use Sage Payroll, but you'll be using it from the start of the tax year, i.e. from the 6th of April, because in that scenario, you wouldn't need to enter any opening balances. Now, I will just mention there will soon be a third option where you can import existing payroll details from your previous software. So look out for updates on this in the in-product and also within our help center. So what I want to do next is to play you a bit of a video demo on setting up a new payroll. So we're going to show you all of the steps involved in setting up a brand new company. And then once we've covered that off, we'll give you a quick recap and we'll look at the other route of migrating existing data. So I have for you a video I recorded earlier. We're just going to set that running and I'll be back with you in about 6 minutes. In this demo, we're going to show you how to set up a new payroll from scratch in Sage Payroll. So as you can see, we're on the Summary tab where there are two options. The first is if you have data from an existing payroll, which you can enter manually, and the one that we're going to use is to set up a new payroll from scratch by clicking here on New Company. Now you'll see there are two steps involved. We'll need to set up our employee pay days by creating a payday calendar, and then we'll add our employees to payroll, providing all their personal details, etc. So to complete this first step and set up the pay days, we'll click on the link next to step 1. And you'll see in the payday calendar settings, we have 4 options for the different pay frequencies, which are weekly, monthly, 2-weekly, or 4-weekly. So with any weekly based calendar, and I'm going to set up a weekly calendar in this example, you'll need to choose the employee's pay day as a day of the week. So in this case, our employees are going to receive their pay every Friday. So from the payday, we will select Friday from that drop-down list. We also need to record the date of the first pay run, which in my example will be Friday the 19th of February. And then there's an option to avoid public holidays and weekends. And for this weekly calendar, I'm going to clear that option, as I always want to record the payday as being the Friday of each week. To save this calendar, I click Save. And then if I need to make any changes, I can go back to Manage Frequency, and then I can either edit the paydays, or if I want to delete this calendar and start again, I can remove that frequency. So it works much the same for 2-weekly and 4-weekly. Slightly different for a monthly calendar, so we'll set one of these up as well. As you can see, with a monthly calendar, you don't choose a day of the week, you choose a day of the month, and that might be the same day of each month, or you can choose the last day of the month. So I'm going to go with same day of month, and pay date for my monthly paid employees will be the 25th. We need to confirm the month of the first pay run. In our example, it'll be February. And this time I am going to select the option to avoid public holidays and weekends. So if the 25th lands on a weekend or bank holiday, it will choose the previous working day. So if I save this calendar, we can see that we now have 2 pay calendars set up. And if we want to view the pay dates coming up for the rest of the tax year, I just need to click on to View Pay Calendar here at the top of the screen. And you can see it indicates that our current weekly pay date is the 19th of February. And we can see the other Friday pay dates for our weekly payroll up to the end of the tax year. And the current monthly pay date is the 25th of February, which for this month will be a Thursday. So that's our pay calendar set up. If you need to come back to this setting, you can always go to the settings option and then come back to calendar settings. But we're now going to return to the summary and back into this new company option. And we can now complete step 2 and add our employees to payroll. So to add your employees to payroll, you can click the link next to step 2. That takes you into the Employees tab, and you'll see there's an option at the top to create employee. Now, if you're setting up employees that you're employing for the first time, they should have with them a P45, or they'll have filled in a starter checklist, also known as a P46, and you will need to enter those details as part of this process. So we're going to start with the personal details and contact details. Make sure you enter the employee's full name and the correct date of birth and national insurance number. And if you do plan to email your pay slips, you'll need to enter their email address and a password. So if I now scroll down, we have the employment details and directorship details. So this includes the pay cycle, contracted hours, their start date and payment method. And then moving down to previous tax details, you can see there are three options. It's either an existing employee, they have a P45, or they have a P46, also known as a starter checklist. So in this demo, the employee has a P45 from their previous employer. We can choose the circumstances that apply to this employee. So one of the three statements, and you'll get an explanation of each statement here on the right-hand side. Just going to set the national insurance category, and then I can enter the details from their P45. So once all of that is entered, you can click on to save. That creates the first employee record, and then you can repeat this step for any other employees that you need to add to this payroll. So once you've created the employees you need, if you head back to the Summary tab, you'll see that that now takes you to the payroll summary. So it shows you the upcoming pay runs. So we have a weekly pay run on the 19th of February and a monthly pay run on the 25th. Some information about RTI submissions, and then a section that we'll need to use when we set up our automatic enrolment and pensions, which we'll be showing you later on in this webinar. Okay, so that video demo was on setting up a new payroll. If you have any questions on that, do feel free to send them through in the Q&A panel. I'll give you a quick recap of the two stages that were involved. We started by setting up a payday calendar, which you can do for weekly, monthly, 2 weekly, or 4 weekly. We chose the day of the week or day of the month that the employees are paid, and that is the date that they receive the money rather than the date they worked up to. And then once it's set up, you can view a pay calendar, and that'll allow you to check the pay dates moving forward for the rest of the current tax year. Second step was setting up the employee records. The key details to get right are the full name, NI number, date of birth, gender, and address, because that will be matched against HMRC systems. So personal and contact details were entered, employment details, and that would have included the pay cycle that they're on, and RTI pay ID if it's an existing payroll that you're setting up at the beginning of a tax year. Directorship details can be entered if required for a director, and then brand new employees would have a P45 or P46, in which case you would enter the relevant details from there. Now, it is actually very similar steps when moving to Sage Payroll, but there is a little bit more involved when you're migrating from another payroll system. Now, assuming you're doing this in the middle of a tax year, so you're not just starting from the 6th of April, maybe you're moving across in February, like I'm doing in my examples, you would choose the option that you have some existing data, and then you'll see it takes you into a 3-step wizard where you will need to confirm the last completed P32 reporting period as you set up your pay calendar, and you'll also need to enter some opening balances. You get most of that information from P11 reports. So we'll go through this after our next video demo, but we're now going to show you the steps involved in moving to Sage Payroll when you're entering the details manually. So here comes your next video demo. In this demo, we're going to take a look at moving to Sage, where you have data from an existing payroll. And we're going to enter this information using the Enter Manually option. So as you can see in the Add Payroll Data Wizard, there are 3 stages to complete. We'll need to set up a pay calendar, we'll need to set up our employees, and then we'll need to confirm the details. So in this first section, we do need to confirm our P32 reporting frequency and payment method, and the last completed reporting period. Now you must have completed all payrolls for this period, which ends on the 5th of the month in your previous payroll software. So in this case, we're going to have completed up to month 10, January 2021. What I can then do is just scroll down and I can set up my payday calendars. In this simple example, I have monthly paid employees. They're going to be paid on the same day each month, and that day of the month will be the 25th. And we're going to leave the option selected to avoid public holidays and weekends. If I then select Next, that moves us onto the employee section where we can start to add our employees. So I'll click Add Employee here at the top, and we'll start by entering the employee's name and personal and contact details. Once we've done that, we can then move on to the tax details. As this is an existing employee, we do need to make sure we've entered the original start date, as well as their current tax code and NI category, and the RTI Pay ID from our previous payroll software. As they've already been paid in this tax year, we'll also need to enter opening balances. This includes taxable pay and tax paid, and national insurance details, which you can get from P11 or similar reports in your previous payroll software. So we'll tick paid this year, and then enter some PAYE and NIC details. If I scroll down, if required, you can also enter director details, statutory payments received this year, such as maternity, adoption or paternity pay, student loan repayments, and if they started employment in this tax year, their P45 or P46 details. When you've finished, just click Save, and you can then repeat that process for any other employees you need to set up. Now, just something to be aware of at this point, to save the information that you've entered here, you must complete the confirmation step. If you navigate away from this screen, you will lose any information entered. You can come back to this screen to add other employees later, as long as you've not processed any pay runs. So if you do need to do this, just make sure you've clicked Next and then Submit to save the information you've entered so far. Now, when you're finished, you'll see a list of your next steps, which includes entering statutory pay recovery values, if applicable, confirming working patterns, entering current absences while processing the pay, and setting up student loan deductions, again, while processing pay. So I'm going to click on to Done, which then takes us back to our payroll summary. And if we did need to go back to add further employees or to review any of the information we've entered so far, it's just a case of clicking this link, Review, Edit, or Further Configure Your Migrated Data. Then click Review or Edit Your Migrated Data. And that then takes you back to the Add Payroll Data wizard. One final tip, if you want to check the opening balances that you've entered, you might want to run P11 reports, which should show a brought forward line representing those values. So you can access these if you click Year End, and then click Review Employee Pay, P11. I'm going to view the P11 for the employee I just set up, And as you can see, we've got that brought forward line representing the values that we entered as opening balances. So that was a quick look at moving to Sage Payroll, completing that Add Payroll Data Wizard. So I just wanted to kind of expand on a few of the points there. When you completed the first step, where you're confirming the last P32 reporting period, it is important that if you have a weekly pay frequency, that you have completed all weekly pay dates in the tax period in your previous software. So tax periods begin on the 6th of the month and end on the 5th of the following month. So if we were looking at February as an example, if you're moving over in February, the last weekly pay date on a Friday before the February tax month would actually be the 5th of February, because that happened to be a Friday. We then set up employees with opening balances if they've been paid in the tax year. And really important, confirm the migration details and complete those steps to save any information you've entered. Even if you haven't completely finished, do that so that you don't lose information by navigating away. Now, we did mention P11 reports, and I just wanted to show you where you'd get some of the key information from if you were working off that type of report. So as you can see, PAYE details come from the P11 totals, which you would find on the PAYE section of a P11 report. And then for national insurance, as well as the total national insurance paid for the employee and employer, you'll also need earnings between the various earnings bands, and they're organized into sort of columns on P11 NIC detail reports. So hopefully you can get these reports or something very similar from your previous payroll system. Something else to draw your attention to, once you've entered those opening balances, when it takes you to the next steps, there is a step about entering statutory pay recovery values and also employment allowance values claimed in the tax year so far. So in order to correctly submit your payroll information, you will need to enter any of the statutory pay you've recovered so far in the tax year. And also, if you're claiming employment allowance, you'll need to indicate as such and record the amount of the allowance you've used. And I'll give you a bit more detail on employment allowance when we work through the next section. Now, one other side note, we do have some development with an alternative way of bringing your information in. This feature is coming soon. We don't have a release date as yet, but we expect it will be in the coming weeks. It'll be possible to import employee information using an FPS file from your previous payroll, which would include employee details and opening balances. So look out for that one coming soon. We'll update you in product and also on our help center as soon as that feature is available. So now that we've got the pay calendars and the employee set up, we have got some additional steps that we'll need to complete. And the first one I just wanted to mention is employment allowance, as this is something that we've just covered on migrating your payroll data. Now, if you're eligible for employment allowance, you will need to set it up in your software. It's a government scheme that allows eligible employers to claim up to £4,000 per year. It's an incentive for employing people, an employment allowance, and it enables you to reduce your employer national insurance contributions when you're making payments to HMRC. Now, to check whether you meet the criteria, you can check on the gov.uk website, and if you are eligible, you will need to record the claim each tax year you're eligible within your software. So you'll see there is a section for this on the payroll summary, which I've highlighted on the slide. To submit a claim, you'll simply need to choose the industry sector that applies to your business and then confirm whether state aid rules apply, which they do in almost all cases. And then you would make a submission, a one-off submission, usually at the start of each year, and that confirms to HMRC that you intend to claim this allowance, and they'll write to you confirming that you are eligible. What that then does is it tells you that the claim is successfully sent. And at the end of each month, when you're working out your payment, if there is any employment allowance to claim, it will be offset against the employer's national insurance, thereby reducing the amount that you pay, and you're claiming back up to £4,000 per year from the government. So great scheme if you're eligible for it, and pretty simple to set up in the software as well. Right, so moving on, the next thing that we're going to take a look at setting up is payments and deductions. Now, this is technically optional at this stage. You can set these up at any point, including when you do your first pay run. But by doing this in advance, it might save you just a little bit of time. So before I recap it, let's have a look at a video demo, and we'll see how simple it is to set up payments and deductions in Sage Payroll. Once you've set up your employees, there are a few things to set up before your first pay run. And the first thing we're going to look at is payments and deductions. Now, if I go to settings, at the top of the screen here, you'll see there is a setting for payment and deduction settings. And then you'll be able to create and manage payments and deductions using the tabs here at the top of the screen. Now, you don't have to set these up right now, but it will save you some time when you come to process your pay, because the payment will be available to select for your employees rather than you having to create it at that time. So I'm going to click on to create new payment here at the top, and you'll see for each payment you create, you'll need to choose a payment category, which would usually be either hourly payments or salary if you're creating any kind of fixed amount. But there are other options for holiday pay paid in advance, expenses, being taxable or non-taxable, and also redundancy payments that are subject to employers' national insurance. So we're just going to set up a couple of payments in this demo. The first one is going to be for my monthly paid employee, and they're going to receive a fixed salary. So I'm going to use salary as the payment category, and then under payment type, I'm going to choose salary again. It will then suggest the name and description that I want to use, and I see no reason to change those. And there's a further setting right at the bottom to include this payment in pension earnings and also in qualifying earnings. So I'm just going to save this first payment. And if I create a new payment, let's set one up for our weekly paid employees who are going to be paid using an hourly rate. So I'll choose hourly payments for this one. And then I'll choose basic hours. Again, I could change the name and description if I wanted to, and we have those settings for pension and qualifying earnings, which I'm going to include in both. And then we can repeat for any other types of payment we might need to make, for example, commission payments, or perhaps overtime being another hourly payment. The deductions is used primarily for voluntary deductions, or non-qualifying pension schemes. So you would only set up a pension here if it's not being used for automatic enrolment. And as you can see, it's also used for attachment of earnings orders and student loans. So I'm not going to set up any deductions. I've got a couple of payments to get us started. If we head back to the summary tab, we're then going to have a look at auto enrolment and pensions in our next demo. Okay, so just a quick one there, looking at setting up payments and deductions. Really straightforward. Simply choose the category and payment type, which will then apply the appropriate settings, whether that's hourly or fixed amounts. Amend the name and description if required. You're free to do that. And then you've got the settings to include them in pensionable and qualifying earnings, which should make a bit more sense once we go through the auto enrolment and pensions setup. So let's just jump on to the next section. where we're going to run through setting up auto-enrolment and pensions. Again, I've broken this down into a 3-step process. The first will be to confirm your duty start date or staging date. You've then got some preparation steps to work through, and then you'll be adding your pension details, which will determine how the calculation of pension is done. So we've got one final video demo taking you through these steps. So let's roll VT. In this demo, we're going to take a look at setting up auto-enrolment and pensions in Sage Payroll. So you can see we've started here on the payroll summary, and towards the bottom right corner, we've got the section for auto-enrolment/pensions, and there's a box where we need to record a staging date. Now, for a brand new business that's just taken on their first employee, you won't have a staging date as such. You'll have a duty start date, which is the date that you took on that first employee. But if you're an existing payroll, you may have been given a staging date by the pensions regulator when your duties took effect, or if you're a more recent employer, you'll have had a duty start date when you took on your first employee. Now, as we're setting up a brand new company, we're going to enter a staging date which represents the date we took on our first employee. So in this case, it'll be the 1st of February 2021. And I'm then going to click the option to set my staging date. So you can see it tells me I've reached my staging date and there's a bit of preparation I will need to do. I'm just going to click OK to that message. And then we can either follow this link to prepare for auto-enrolment, or we can go to the Pensions tab at the top of the screen, and that will then take us into a preparation checklist. Now, if you're already staged for automatic enrolment, you'll be able to tick some of these off straight away. But as a brand new business, you should nominate a pensions contact with the pensions regulator, and there's a link for you to do that from this step. Once you've done it, you can tick the box to say that that's complete, and your next task is to assess your workforce. Now, Sage Payroll will do this automatically when you do your first pay run. So we're going to tick it to indicate that our workforce will be assessed. And then if we just scroll down, we can see step 3 is to review our pension arrangements. And this is the screen where we're going to be able to set up our pension scheme. Now, if you don't have an existing pension scheme because you're a brand new employer, there are some suggested providers that we link off to down here. But if you've already arranged your pension scheme, we can mark that as yes. And then we will need to add the details into Sage Payroll. So I'm going to click on Add a New Pension. And you'll see, again, we can choose from selected providers, Nest, Now Pensions, People's Pension, and Smart Pension. Or if you've gone with another provider, you can add your own pension by using this last option in the list. So I'm going to choose Nest. It's quite a common pension provider of small businesses. And you'll see I need to enter my employer reference, which I'm going to enter like so. And then we'll need to set up at least one group and one payment source. And the group is where you're going to enter the contribution details, so the percentages that you'd like to deduct and how that percentage should be calculated. Now, for other providers, this might be known as a plan, a pension plan. For Nest, it's a group. So I'm going to click onto Add Group. And I'm going to enter the name of the group that I set up on the Nest website. So let's just say it was Group 1. We can select our contribution rates, which in most cases will be percentages. And then we can specify the employer and the employee contribution to the pension. And currently the minimum pension contributions by law are 3% for the employer, a total of 8%. So that would be a 5% contribution for the employee if the employer is just put it in the minimum. Now the next setting is really important, the earnings basis, and this determines how the pension contribution will be calculated. So 2 options here. You can apply it, or 3 options in fact. You can apply to pensionable pay. So these are for schemes that use a specific type of payment, for example, basic pay, as the basis of calculations. You can apply to qualifying earnings, which means all payments flagged as qualifying, and that should include overtime and bonus payments will be used to calculate pension contributions, but they will be restricted to earnings between a lower and upper threshold. And there's a customs earnings basis that you can choose as well. So I'm going to apply to qualifying earnings because that's the way my pension scheme works. There's a setting to deduct the contribution before tax if your scheme is what's known as a net pay arrangement for tax relief. The scheme I've chosen has a relief at source arrangement, which means deductions are taken after tax, which is why I haven't selected that box. And then you can record the date that your payments to the pension provider are due. So I've just gone with the 22nd of each month in this case. Finally, we're going to make this our default plan. So we're going to automatically enroll employees into this pension group, but that can be changed if required during the pay process. And if I then click add, we've added our pension group, and that'll be used to work out their contributions. Now with Nest, you also need to add a payment source, which you'll have already set up on the Nest online portal. So I'm just going to name mine and set it as the default. You need to mark it as a qualifying scheme. So we've got the box ticked there already. And then we just need to tick the box to accept the terms. And we can then save that pension scheme. So now that that scheme has been created, I can tick the box to say that that pension scheme qualifies. I'll then just scroll to the bottom of this checklist. So my last task is to communicate auto-enrollment changes to our employees. And we do have an option here to print some letters. So this is a letter that you can send to your new employees, just letting them know about auto-enrollment legislation. So I'm just going to close those letters. I'm going to mark that step as complete. And if we return to the summary, we can see that we've completed that checklist. And if I go back to pensions, I can then view my pension details. I can make any changes if needed using Edit Pension. And then we can add any additional pension schemes that we might have, maybe with other providers. So that's your auto enrollment and pension setup, and we are now just about ready to complete our first pay run. Right, so that was auto enrollment and pensions. So we saw the 3 stages there was to enter a duties start date for an existing payroll. That could be your original staging date. Or for more recent employers, it would be the date you took on your first employee. Work through the preparation steps. So a bit of a tick box exercise, but one of those steps requires you to add the pension details. So as you can see, there were some pension providers that you could select, or you could add your own. You'd need to enter any references that you had and set up pension plans or groups. And if you are with Nest, you would need to ensure that any groups or sources that you set up in Sage exactly match the settings when you created them on the Nest portal. So the same case, same percentages, etc. And then the details of each group contained the contribution rates, which is almost always percentage. But do make sure you've checked the earnings basis. So if the pensionable pay is based on qualifying earnings, which is quite common with the more recent pension schemes, make sure you apply to qualifying earnings. Or if it's a specific element of pay, for example, basic pay only, that is when you would choose pensionable earning. The tax relief setting will determine whether you tick or clear the deduct before tax box. So if you're at all unsure of your pension settings, you should always check that out with your pension provider, who will give you that clarity. Now, if you don't already have a provider, or if you have any questions on the duties under automatic enrolment, the pensions regulator is a great place to get some support with that. So you'll find their website at tpr.gov.uk. Right, so it's about time now that we have a look at actually processing a pay run. No video for this one. I'm going to take you through a live demo of this process, and it's also going to give me the opportunity to show you some of the help options available within the software. So without further ado, I'm just going to share my screen with you, and we're going to run our first payroll in Sage, and we'll take you through the very simple 4-step process for doing just that. So just switching over to my other screen. As you can see, I'm already logged into Sage Payroll, and we've landed on the payroll summary screen. From here, we can see upcoming pay runs. So I have a weekly pay run for tomorrow's pay date. I also have a monthly pay run due at the same time. But what I really wanted to point out is that anywhere you are in Sage Payroll, you will always see the help icons dotted around, which takes you to our online help. So if you haven't yet done your setup and you're looking for help with perhaps setting up employees, when you're on the employees section, you can go to the help page and it will take you to the exact place that you need to be for help with entering those details. So you'll find a wealth of information within our help files. If there's some question that you have that isn't answered and you need to get in contact with us from any help topic, you can scroll down to the bottom to see how to get in touch. So various ways you can get in touch with our support team. We certainly recommend the Q&A live route, as you'll get your answer in minutes, if not seconds, by joining a live Q&A session and speaking to one of our advisors that way. But if you prefer, you've got online chat, telephone, or the Sage City community as alternatives. So I just wanted to assure you that it can be daunting when you're first setting up a payroll, but there's plenty of help available. You can get to the index of the help page using this help option at the top. That's even got a search, so you can search for the topic you need help with, and look out for the question mark icons dotted around the program. Really useful to give you that extra support that you need. Now, with that out of the way, I'm just going to show you one of the settings before we dive into a pay run. So as part of running our payroll, we're going to produce some pay slips. So within the settings, you do have a pay slip settings option. And this is where you can choose between 3 different formats. So it's personal preference. What do you want your pay slips to look like? You've got that one. You've got this other green one. And you've got this one here at the bottom. And pay slips can be either printed onto plain paper or emailed to your employees if you've provided their email address. So you might want to choose your preferred payslip from the settings before you go ahead and run your payroll. So back to the payroll summary, we can see that we've got a couple of upcoming pay runs. I'm going to do a weekly pay run in this example, and I could go straight to it by clicking Process Pay Run, or alternatively, I can click on the Pay Runs tab here at the top, and I can process the pay run from the link on the left-hand side. So this is the 4-step process that I mentioned, and the first step is to confirm your pay date for this tax week. This should be the date that the employees receive their pay, and it's taken from the pay calendar that you set up initially. So this is the Friday pay date for my weekly paid employee. Could be changed if required, but there's usually no good reason to change the pay date. So we are going to stick with Friday the 26th. We're then going to click Next, and it'll give us the opportunity to add any absences for which we may need to pay a statutory payment. So note that we've got all of our weekly paid employees listed on the left-hand side. So just 2 of them in this example. And if either of them have been absent over the last week due to sickness, maternity, paternity, or adoption, you've got some links here where you can set up the relevant statutory payment. Now in today's example, there are no absences, so we're going to move on to our 3rd step. And this is where we're going to start to enter some payment information. Now this is the very first pay run that I've done, so there are no payments allocated to each employee, but because we set them up in advance, I can just hover over Add Payment, and for this weekly paid employee, I'm going to assign them the basic hours payment that I set up, and then I'll be able to enter the number of hours worked, 35 in this example, and the hourly rate. And we're going to pay this employee £15 an hour. Now, you might have noticed just then we've got an alert to tell us that the employee is eligible and they're being automatically enrolled. And that just means they meet the criteria to be put into a pension scheme. So they're aged between 22 and state pension age, and they earn more than the equivalent of £10,000 per year. And as such, it's put them into our nest pension that we've just set up, and it has calculated the pension contribution. Now, if there are any additional pay lines that we need to add, we can add them from this section, and we can even create new payments should we need to. So I'm going to create a salary-based payment for commission, and we can decide whether that should be in our pensionable and qualifying earnings. And with this being a fixed amount, we just need to type the relevant amount in the rate column. So I've got basic hours and commission for this employee. Things like tax and national insurance have been calculated automatically, as has the nest pension in this example. So what I can then do is I can select any other employee on my weekly payroll and repeat those steps. So this employee hasn't got any commission, they've done 20 hours this week, and they're being paid £8 an hour. So you can see it's worked out their total pay. They are not eligible at this stage to be enrolled into the pension scheme, but if their pay went above £192 per week, that's at the point that it would trigger automatic enrolment. So that will happen automatically, making sure that we don't miss out on our legal duties. So once we've got the payment information and we can see a summary of things like hours and pay on the left-hand side, we can move on to our final step, which is to complete the pay run. So it gives us confirmation that we're paying 2 employees and what the total cost of the wages are. So that would be the gross pay and things like employer, pension and national insurance. There's a link to open a detailed report, which looks a bit like this, which you might want to check over before you confirm the pay run. Make sure you're happy with the information entered. And you can also preview the pay slips, have a look at what they're going to look like. And as you might have noticed, this is a draft copy. We'll actually do the official pay slip once we've confirmed the payroll. You also get your pay trends, and that will start to compare previous periods with the current. And if we're happy with all this information, I would simply complete the pay run. And this is the point at which we submit the information to HMRC. So user ID and password is what you're going to need for your Government Gateway account. So I've got a note of mine somewhere, which I'll just pop in now. Save your time, you can store your password for future submissions. And then to confirm those details, I will click confirm. It just tells me there that the data is being submitted and that our pay run values have been confirmed and updated. And at this point, if we're using Sage Accounting, it will also have posted that payroll information into our accounts. So a quick look around the completed pay run screen. We've got the section where we can generate the pay slips for each employee. So we can either do it for individual employees by emailing them a pay slip or printing their pay slip from PDF, or we can export all of the pay slips either as a PDF or by email. Just underneath, we've got our RTI information. So it's actually gone through. The FPS has been successfully sent, which means we've reported our payroll to HMRC. And then on the right-hand side, we've got an option for pension submissions. So with Nest, you can transmit your information directly to the pension provider. And again, we've got a help option. It's going to take you to the relevant help on how you would do that. So that's another task that we have, a breakdown of our of our payroll information, net wages we're paying by bank transfer, and again, the pay trends. There's also the option to edit the pay run should you discover a mistake further down the line. We've got some information on correcting payrolls in the handout, so do check that out from the handouts icon if you haven't already done so. So just returning to the pay runs for a moment, you can see that that is now a historical entry. It has been processed. So if we want to get back and look at any of that information from that pay date, just a case of clicking on it from pay runs, and then we can see the same information we saw before. We've got the detailed report, and we can also report on this period using any of the reports from the reporting menu, most popular one being employee net pay. So you could generate a report. I'll just choose my tax year and frequency, week 47, and then that again could be exported as a PDF or even as a CSV, depending on what you need to do with it. So that's a nice simple at a glance view of my employees' net pay amounts. So that's our pay run complete. Let's give you a quick recap, and we'll also touch upon some of the month-end tasks that you'll need to do before we wrap up. Okay, so in the demo, we showed you processing a pay run, which was the 4-step process, confirming the pay date, adding statutory absences, entering payment and deduction values, and then completing the pay run. Once it's complete, you've got access to the pay slips that you can email or print. You'll have a pension submissions option. So if you're not with Nest, with other providers, you will be able to produce a report and export that as a CSV. We've got information about any submissions that you've sent or that are due, and then we've got the pay method breakdown, etc. Also, if it is the last pay run of the tax month, so if you've completed that tax period by running all payrolls, you'll see there is an additional option at the bottom for the P32 employer payment record. So this is the report each month that tells you how much you need to pay to HMRC. And you do have one final task in the software to complete at the end of the month, which is to record that payment. So a quick look at what that involves. On the payroll summary, under the RTI information, you'll see once you've completed a month that you've got record payment / EPS. And when you go into that option, you just answer the questions about small employers relief and NI employment allowance. Check the amount that you are paying to HMRC, make sure you're happy with it, record the payment date, and that can then be posted and recorded in your Sage software. So that actually brings us to the end of what we're going to do in today's webinar. Before I go though, I do want to give you the opportunity to ask any final questions that you might have. You can pop those into the Q&A. And I'd also like to tell you about some further support that is available, some of which I showed you in that previous demo. So if you need help, there is plenty of help available online. From within Sage Payroll, you've got the help icon in the top right-hand corner, which takes you onto the landing page of the Help Center. But also look out for the question mark icons, because they are dotted around everywhere, and that will give you context-sensitive help for the area of Sage Payroll you are currently in. If you need to get in touch with our support team, just go to any help article. If it hasn't answered your question, scroll to the bottom and get in touch. I'd strongly recommend Q&A Live. It's the quickest way to get an answer to your payroll question. You just join a session similar to this one, runs 9 till 5 Monday to Friday, and you'll be able to ask your questions and get your answers, as I say, in minutes, if not seconds. So I'd just like to thank you for attending our webinar today. As I say, we'll look out for any questions that come through. I do hope you found the session useful. We try to pack quite a lot in, so it hopefully gives you the confidence that you'll be able to set up and run your payroll in Sage. Thanks again for joining us. Stay safe, and I do hope to see you on another webinar soon. If you've asked any questions, we will look to answer those over the next few minutes.